Hey everybody, my name is Katelyn, and tonight I want to try a little something. I'm going to do a vlog, and I've never done one before, but I've always been curious to try it out. It'd be good practice for like talking to the camera, because I do a lot of film production stuff, and there are occasions where I need to fill in for an actor or something like that, and I never felt like I really had a good camera presence, so I'm just working on that vocalization and stuff like that. But I wanted to vlog about a TV show I started watching recently that premiered on the History Channel in 2013, and it is Vikings. And I got this DVD from Half Price Books. I don't know, I've never been really into like Hulu and Netflix and all those live streaming online programs, sites, because I just don't feel like paying for a monthly subscription. But I got season 1, not sure what I'm going to do for season 2. They only had the first one in the store. But I figured maybe for every episode, just talk a little bit about it, because, not too many Vikings vlogs that I saw on YouTube, at least none about the show. You type in Vikings vlog, and a lot of it is sports vlogs because of the Minnesota Vikings, but let's just see where this goes. I'm a little late with this idea because I'm already 3 episodes into the series, so I'm going to try to remember just the first episode, and I'm going to have to do that for the first 3, because ideally I would like to get to the point where I can watch an episode and then just immediately vlog my thoughts about it. And I want to start early so I don't have to do too much catching up on this. But, okay, we're going to talk about the first episode, which I believe is called Rites of Passage, or Rite of Passage. Okay, says it right in there, on there, Rites of Passage. And that, of course, is the pilot episode where you get introduced to all of the characters and the setting. And right off the bat, something that they do in the episode that I actually really liked, and they do this all throughout the series, but just in terms of the first episode, they take an interesting approach to the language issue. Because, obviously Vikings did not speak English. Really, nobody back in the I think it's in the 9th century. But nobody really spoke English as we knew it back then. Even people in Great Britain spoke Old English, what Beowulf was originally written in. And usually when in film or TV, when you're faced with a situation like that where you are dealing with a culture that does not speak English, usually you take 2 approaches. One, you just have them speak English, and the audience is meant to assume either that they're speaking this other language, or they're meant to really not think about it at all. Or you could take sort of the Passion of the Christ approach, where you just have the whole thing in this foreign language and put subtitles. And that's that's manageable for a movie, just like a standalone film, but for a TV series that has a lot of deadlines to worry about, that's probably not a good idea, because you're just at the mercy of your actor's ability to learn all their dialogue in a dead language, and some are better at that than others. But what they do in Vikings is the very first scene of the first episode, they do this. The first couple of lines are in Old Norse, which, is the language that the Vikings spoke, with subtitles. And then after that, the characters speak English. So it's like they're establishing, almost like a book would do. They're just establishing this is the language that they're speaking, but this is what they're actually saying. We have interpreted this for you. So, that's kind of a clever approach. I can't really think of anything else, any other movie or show that's done that. No, actually, well, if it even counts, the Mel Brooks remake of To Be or Not to Be, which is set in Poland. And the way that movie starts out, it's him and Anne Bancroft arguing in Polish, and then like the announcer at the theater where they're performing just makes an announcement: for the sake of the audience's sanity, the rest of this movie will not be spoken in Polish. And then they both just have this big sigh of relief. But another interesting thing about the show that I actually didn't know going into this, I did a little bit of research for the vlog, is that they are based on real historical events. Well, loosely based on real historical events, because obviously for, narrative purposes, you have to change a few things. But it deals with the real-life Viking, try to remember his name here, Ragnar Lothbrok. I always want to say Rothrock because of Cynthia Rothrock, the actress, but no, it's Lothbrok, I think. Lothbrok. Okay, we're gonna go with that. Let's just say Ragnar. And his raids of England. And the show starts off in his original village, in Scandinavia, of course. And at this time, I don't know how historically accurate this is, but apparently the Vikings have no knowledge of England. They don't know that any land at all exists to the west. They think, there's only land to the east, and so every year when they pillage and plunder, they just go east to Russia. The clan leader, who is played by Gabriel Byrne, I was actually kind of surprised to see him, because I know him from, what's that Schwarzenegger movie called? End of Days. He was the devil in that. That kind of sets a precedent for this role, if you really think about it, but he is the leader, and they establish right away that he's crooked. Like, he's insecure about his power, so he always kind of looks for reasons to eliminate people who pose a threat to his rule. But he doesn't want to go to the west. He wants to, go where he knows there's definitely going to be something to plunder, because he has to, these are his ships. He paid to have them made, so he doesn't want to throw any away. And they establish right away that he hates Ragnar, because Ragnar always objects to him. But there's a trial scene at the beginning where they, this is meant to establish not just the Viking culture, but also, Gabriel Byrne's evil villain character, where a character, some random Joe Schmo who lives in the village, is found guilty of murder, and the convicted kind of throws a comment out there during the trial about the clan leader wanting some land that this murder was apparently the result of a land dispute. But Gabriel Byrne cuts him off, and that right there tells you pretty much everything you need to know about Gabriel Byrne's character. And the sentence for this convicted murderer is execution, which I've heard is not accurate, historically accurate. I believe exile, as opposed to execution, was the capital punishment for Viking culture. But, it's a TV show, it's the first episode. You gotta make us hate Gabriel Byrne right away. So he's a crooked guy who sentences people to death for their land. But you never really know, I don't recall anyway, how Ragnar, if it's just an intuition that he has, what gives him the idea that there actually could be land to the west. But he's convinced of this, and he's figured out basically the first compass, which is really interesting. I want to look into this too, where, to my understanding, it's accurate, but I'm just curious to know more about them. Where the compasses back then, they didn't really, there's not a whole lot of technology to a compass anyway, but it's almost more like a navigation wheel. It goes by the sun like it's a sundial sort of. It goes by that more than like magnetic fields. But you float this board in the water. And it has like a little needle sticking up out of the middle, and you draw rings around it. And when, depending on where the sun is, the shadow will be a certain length. And, the rings indicate where the end of the shadow should be. And if it's, a little too long or a little too short, then you'll know you're off course. So that's how Vikings figured out how to sail through open water without getting lost. So he's showing this to his brother Rollo, Ragnar and Rollo. And there's also this stone. It's called a sunstone, which is also said to have been real, but there haven't been any actually recovered by archaeologists, but somehow it's a known fact that they had these things, which you can hold up to the sky, and it actually, on a cloudy day or at night, and somehow it's able to determine where the sun would be, or it's able to form some source of light that you can then use for the sun so that your device keeps working. So just little stuff like that is kind of neat. But basically he convinces his brother, who, interesting story with the brother there, they hint, I think this was in the first episode, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I'm pretty sure it was in the first episode, they hint that there may have been a thing between him and Ragnar's wife, Lagertha, at one point, and she's not into it now, but, he still kind of thinks about her when he's with other women. Yeah, okay, Rollo. But and Lagertha's another interesting character, obviously. She's a female Viking. They call them a shield maiden. And her whole thing is that she's a woman who fights alongside the men, or at least she used to, because now she and Ragnar have kids and they're on this farm. And she's kind of the one who has to maintain all of that while he goes off doing his Viking thing. And there's a weird scene. This might be in the second episode. I'll get back to it. It's just so odd. Like what exactly they're looking to accomplish in this scene where she gets mad at him and they have a fight about it, like a legit Viking fight about this. Mommy and Daddy don't just argue in this universe. But anyway, there is a neat scene with her, though, in the first episode, because they obviously got to establish character right away, where Ragnar is taking their son to another village for his rites of passage. That's where the title of the episode comes from. So she and the daughter, they have 2 kids, are alone on the farm, and then these 2 other guys come along. It doesn't really say if they're from the village or if they're just wandering guys, but they come into her house, and it's obvious, they're there to make trouble and, have their way with her, and she basically just murders them with a fire poker, or I think that's what it is. I mean, it's not a fireplace, it's just an open fire in the middle of the house, and she's got something that kind of looks sword-like. It's got like a sword handle, and she just, she says her little badass line, like, "You couldn't take me if you tried for 100 years." And then they decide to try for 1 minute, and, she kills one guy, I think, like she stabs him with the burning hot fire poker, and then the other guy, I guess, like half limps, half crawls out. But where was I going? Okay, so long story short, too late. Ragnar and Rollo are gonna go along with this. Like, Rollo's gonna go along with the idea. He's not wild about it, but what the heck? He's bored. So they need a boat because Gabriel Byrne won't let them use any of his. So Ragnar takes his son to meet another character. If you've watched the show, I don't know, maybe you have trouble not smiling too when you think about this character. I love this character. He is already my favorite one. His name is Floki. And they do make a point, to mention that he's sort of named after the god Loki. This series came out in 2013, a year after the Avengers got popular. So, I mean, there are a lot of mentions of Thor also, but that's understandable. For something about Vikings, that they would mention him all the time, and Odin gets his name dropped occasionally. But they meet Floki, and right off the bat, this guy's crazy because he lives in the woods and makes boats. That's like all this guy does. And his social skills really reflect that. But for some reason, Ragnar brings his son to this. Like, he doesn't just go to Loki, who he already knows. He brings his kid along too, because why not expose the kid to this? Everybody should meet Floki at some point in their life. But Floki's response to his way of introducing himself is basically to do this. My facehugger, Henry. But yeah, he just jumps out, and the mask is made out of tree bark. Like, just everything with this guy is just stuff in the woods, made of wood that he just finds lying around. I'm assuming he has a house. You never see it. At least not in the first episode or the first three. I'd be curious. I can imagine him just kind of living in a Viking van down by the river. But anyway, they go to Floki, and little nitpick. When he first meets the kid, the first thing he says to him is, "You have your father's eyes." And it was in the script, so the actor had to say that. Like, the kid doesn't have his eyes. And the only reason I bring that up is because they really seem to want to make a point of how blue Ragnar's eyes are. Like, I know the actor, Travis Fimmel, he does have blue eyes, but you can tell in a lot of scenes that they're kind of, I don't know if they do it in post, probably in post, like with color correction. They really exaggerate how blue his eyes are, because it's just a very, Viking-esque trait, I guess. So, they really want to pinpoint that he has these blue Viking eyes, but the kid doesn't at all. He doesn't have his eyes. And I don't know if maybe they could use contacts, but that's not really a good thing to subject a child actor to, or what the deal is, or they just found a better actor who happened to have brown eyes. But little thing aside, like, stuff like that in movies always kind of sticks out to me, like in Pirates of the Caribbean, how everybody says that Will Turner looks just like his father, Bootstrap Bill, and then you finally meet Bootstrap Bill, who's played by Stellan Skarsgård, and they don't look anything alike. And Stellan Skarsgård, by the way, is the father of Gustav, I believe is how you would pronounce it, Skarsgård, who plays Floki in Vikings. So, alright, we just came full circle. But Floki, his whole thing is that he has sort of this spiritual connection with the trees. So, like, he can just tell from, like, touching a tree or doing who knows what else to a tree that how good it's going to be for building a certain kind of ship. And he makes, like, custom ships. So, yeah, Ragnar wants him to make this special ship for this unheard of voyage. This is all being done, under the table, because they don't want Gabriel Byrne to find out about it. Because Gabriel Byrne's, the trial scene is the first time you see this, but he kills people just left and right all the time who he finds annoying or possibly a problem. So they got to really be covert about this, which is why they're in the woods. I don't know if there's any more preferable shipbuilders to Floki, but that's who they go to. So basically, he makes the ship, and the episode ends with them testing it out, and you see one of Gabriel Byrne's henchmen, who kind of looks like Graham Chapman from Monty Python, just standing like on the hillside watching them, as menacingly as Graham Chapman can, and then it just cuts to black. But, we get another kind of funny little Floki moment, where he's freaked out. He's like sitting like this on the boat. It's just him and Ragnar and Rollo. I think it's just the three of them. They're testing the boat out, so they don't want to have too many casualties. Just the three most important people. Well, it's because they don't have a crew yet, so it is just the three of them. But he's freaking out because I don't know how Viking ships work, really. He thinks if they raise the sails, that's going to cause the ship to sink. But, Ragnar, they establish he doesn't really listen to rules. He just immediately draws the sail, and the ship doesn't sink, and it goes faster. And then Floki, of course, gets right up and says, "Yes, I knew it would work!" So, Floki. But to backtrack a little bit, I kind of got ahead with the plot there. About the first half of this episode is actually focusing on the rites of passage. It centers a lot on Ragnar and his son Bjorn. I always want to say Bjorn because of The Hobbit, but it's Bjorn with a J after the B. And, what Viking boys have to go through to be seen as men. And apparently all that involves is, putting on a bracelet and then kissing the chief's wife. Okay, easy enough. But it deals a lot with this father-son relationship, which, the dynamic between the two, which, to my understanding, is going to play a much larger role in the story, of the overall series. And from what I've seen, you don't see Bjorn as a kid for very long. He actually, gets recast as an adult, and then I think becomes one of the major characters later on. But because the son isn't really a major character yet, you don't really learn a whole lot about his character. He just seems like kind of a typical kid. Interesting attitude about his parents' love life, though. I'm guessing this is just to reflect Viking culture. Because they do, this is not quite Game of Thrones level sexually active, but you don't really see boobs or anything, but it seems like it's going to be very much in that vein, Vikings, where there's a lot of, Vikings whipping out Mjolnir and such. But there's one scene early on, after Ragnar first brings the kid back from this other town where they had to get some stuff for the rites of passage. Ragnar goes off with his wife, and then Bjorn is just kind of sitting outside awkwardly, and then Rollo shows up and asks him, "Where are your parents? I need to talk to them." And the kid just casually says, "No, they're having sex." Which is just what Rollo wants to hear, But it's as awkward as that is, it's still interesting because it's telling you something about the Viking culture. This was not something that they shied away from. Very few things were things that they shied away from. So it's interesting, even if maybe the cultural depictions aren't 100% accurate. The attitude is still kind of interesting because they're not very noble characters. None of them really come off as noble. They're kind of just opportunists. But aside from the Gabriel Byrne's villain, you don't really you get the sense that you're supposed to dislike any of these characters too much. I mean, there's some, gray morality, with Rollo and all of that. But by and large, they're presented as, everyday Vikings. There's nothing too hard to relate to with them, which, I'm sure, is the aim of this. They want to kind of show the home life of the Vikings a little too, not just the pillaging. But, it's relatable. So I am actually looking forward to watching more of the show, and it's a little after 9, which is usually when I watch Vikings. I might skip tonight, though, just to get caught up in the vlogs. We'll see how long that lasts. Maybe 10 o'clock I'll watch it. But my next vlog, I'm going to edit this together. If you're noticing cuts, it's because when I run out of things to say, I just kind of pause awkwardly and flail around like Jack Sparrow, and only Jack Sparrow can do that. So I'll put this together, post it, well, maybe film the second one before I post it, because that's probably going to need a lot of editing too. But that's the first episode of Vikings. Really liking the show so far. Curious to see where it goes. Viva la Floki.